Hello, welcome to Image Bearers. My name is Otoma Edje. This is the third season, episode 18. So excited to have on the program today, Will Archer, who is the lead evangelist of the Potomac Valley Church. So welcome to the program, Will.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to be with you guys, really humbled to have this opportunity to be able to share a little bit about our story. And thank you so much for the good work that you're doing.
Thank you. And my friend here, Dr. Rodriguez, is also joining us. He's going to be assisting with the interview. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule also, Mr. Richard.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So I know we met Will in 2018. This is before the Rona hit.
Yeah.
I know there was a conference in Virginia. This is the NOW conference.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a few minutes to catch up. And so that was definitely an awesome time. So our interview today is kind of taking a page out of a recent interview that you also had with Michael Burns. So I just want to give credit to his podcast and his program. I think you were on there a few weeks ago and you shared about your church and so forth. And so we'll probably share a few of the same things, but maybe go a little bit deeper in some respects. So again, thank you for taking time out of your day just to join us. I think that your story is one that many people can get some great insights from that they can apply even to their churches and their communities. So for those who are joining us, who are watching this episode, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps us out to get this program to more and more people on the interwebs. Well, let's go ahead and start it out. Mr. Rodriguez, can you please kick it off?
Absolutely. Please share with us some of the great ways that God is working in the Potomac Valley Church, specifically related to small groups and outreach to your local community.
Yeah, so we've made a real commitment here in Potomac Valley to be a church, not just with small groups, but a church of small groups. And so we've intentionally been training and raising up our small group leaders. We're really fortunate to have small groups that extend from Washington, D.C. all the way down to Fredericksburg, and small groups of all different kinds. We are a very diverse, generationally, racially, politically diverse church that's just about 20 miles outside of D.C., that's in the Northern Virginia suburbs. And we think that it's critical for us to focus in on small groups. Critical for us also to make sure that those small groups are really equipped to be able to engage in the local community. As evidence of that, we've made a choice, a strategic choice, to really work with people in terms of in practical ways. Like most recently, we're part of a vaccination effort here in our local community, where just last week, I should say, we're able to get 1,500 people signed up to get vaccinated. And today, actually, a number of those people who got signed up last week are actually getting their vaccines today. Some that even signed up this week are getting their vaccines today.
Excellent. Well, if you could, and that's excellent, really the way you're touching the community like that, and with some of the issues that we're dealing with right now. If you could please share a little bit about how the church has grown since 2007 through 2020, and also share some of the challenges that you face as a church during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like many churches in our fellowship, we're in a fellowship of about 700 churches. We've gone through a continuum kind of in our own growth experience. So we started with one small group, and they're actually members of that small group that are still a part of Potomac Valley 25 years ago. And then about 15 years ago, we went from that small group to becoming a small region or campus of the Northern Virginia Church. We became a cooperative congregation here of our own. In the first 7 years or so, 7 to 8 years with the Potomac Valley Church, are we having a little bit of technical difficulty?
Yeah, Richard, on your side, do you have, I don't know if there's something, a fan going on?
Oh, I've always had it on. Let me turn it off.
Yes, sir.
Turn it off.
Oh, you're
sorry.
good. I just want to make sure it went on my end. So, because
No, I'll turn it off. I had it on last. I've always had it on. I forgot I asked you guys, but okay,
oh
no
yeah,
problem.
no worries, man. So yeah, so
Sorry.
trust me,
Gonna
we're
have to edit that.
in this digital space. We're just trying to make it happen. There's
I
lots
hope
of.
Otoma's a good editor.
I know. He'll get it. He's got it. So, but yeah. So just kind of going back to our story here. So, 2007, we started out as an independent cooperative congregation. Between 2007 and 2014, we started with 132 disciples, and in that 7-year period, we went up to like 160, and then we went back down again to about 135. And some of that was folks moving to different places. We're in a transient area. Some of that was just us working through stuff internally. And we have incredible leaders that gave every bit of their energy to building the church during that period. But we just kind of went up and down. And by the time we got to 2014, we were really at a place where we were struggling with a sense of clear vision and struggling with kind of a clear forward direction. What's noteworthy is we're 20 miles from DC. So the election of President Obama in 2008 had a profound impact on our church.
Oh yeah.
The discourse that folks had, or even things that they shared that others didn't even tell them how they made them feel, created some real tension here in Potomac Valley that had to get worked through. And so when we came in 2014, we started out, took the first 4 months just to meet with every small group and to talk through where they were, what their thoughts were. And at the end of that 4-month period, it was clear that we needed to do some deep work, some deep relational work. And so we took the next 12 months after that to do deep teaching, to study the scriptures, to spend relationship with deep relationship time with people. And then that fall we fasted for a day in September, 3 days in October, 7 days in November, and then we started 2016 with a 21-day fast. And we called the whole congregation together and we said, we've got to commit ourselves to a new vision and a new direction that is based on the scriptures, and that's a shared vision. And so we made a commitment to renew the covenant as we see in the Old Testament. And we really were organized around 3 guiding principles: that we would gather as believers, that we would serve the community, and that we'd multiply the message of Jesus. And so that decision in 2016 really has transformed our church in some pretty radical ways. We've seen just so many miracles, but as evidence of that, the same group that was 135 is now 250 plus baptized disciples and a broader community of around 650 people that includes our kids and folks that regularly attend our church and really are tied into our small group community. So we're just blown away by what God's doing. And we've seen just incredible miracles that have happened in terms of our engagement in the community, people becoming disciples, leaders stepping up. We've seen the appointment. Now we have 10 deacons and 10 deaconesses. So we have an amazing deaconship. We have 2 elders that serve along with their wives. So we have 2 elders' wives that form our core group of leadership. And we just recently appointed our first locally trained and appointed evangelist and women's ministry leader. And so it's been amazing to see just how God has brought people together as we've owned our mistakes, owned that we're messed up people, and really turned our face towards God with a very simple, clear, forward vision.
Excellent. And I imagine that, along the way with the growth, that there were some bumps and so forth where you had to keep a vision before the church. You had to conspire them to build their faith. Can you talk a little bit about how you did that, in terms of keeping the vision before them, building their faith and so forth?
Yeah, we will say this almost every week in our services. We are messed up people. So any of the miracles that I share with you there's always a big caveat. That's from God. We're just trying to make it. So we're messed up people trying to make it. There are tons of bumps. Like I said, we're we're racially, generationally, and politically diverse. We do not vote the same. We don't like the same clothes, the same food. I mean, we're as mixed
But you
as
love
you
the
can
same
get.
music.
We love the same music sometimes, you know. So our unifying principle is we all agree Jesus is Lord.
Amen.
Outside of that, there's a lot of diversity in Potomac Valley.
Right.
You know, so there's been tons of bumps. I mean, but one of the really good things that the Spirit directed us to is having a small group of people where we have a high degree of trust that decide that we're going to stay together. So when we first got here, before we came on staff here, we met with Matt and Michelle Esmacher, who are deacon and deaconess, Patrick and Ruth Jones, elder and elder's wife, and the 6 of us. And we said, no matter what happens, we're going to be ride or die. We're going to be close. And then we added Tom and Eileen Martin to that group. And the 8 of us, we're in a small group. We meet just about every Tuesday night for about 2 hours. We talk through the needs in the church. We talk through the bumps. We work through the situations together. And we work alongside our ministry staff and alongside our small group leaders to be able to address those issues. So we honestly, Dr. Rodriguez, we have tons of issues here, but we try to address them. And we found that if you deal with the little foxes, the big fires don't come. So we try to constantly kind of deal with stuff.
Absolutely. You know, 3 principles have come to be associated, you know, with your ministry. And I just want to share them. And I want to ask you if you could please talk about them in details, if you can break them down for us. The first one is learning. The second one is leadership. And the third one is legacy. Can you break that down for us a little bit more and explain it and how it affects your ministry and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, learning is the foundation of everything. I mean, you know, there's only one Jesus, and it's Jesus. The rest of us, we're all just called to be disciples. And so I think it's really important that we recognize that we should always be learners. And God is teaching us wisdom in so many different places, and he uses so many different means to really give us wisdom and guidance and knowledge and instruction. So I think there has to be a commitment, if you want to follow Jesus, to constantly being a learner, to always being a learner. What that looks like for us here in Potomac Valley is we've made an intentional commitment to learning from other churches. So we learn intentionally from the churches in Southeast Asia. Both myself and a number of us take regular trips. We actually do annual trips to Indonesia to go and study what they're doing in Indonesia and Singapore and Malaysia, because it's a church outside of our context that's having an outsized impact. We constantly evaluate what other churches in our area, not churches in the international churches of Christ, just the other churches in the geography that we're in. We learn what they're doing. We meet with their ministers. We look at their social media. We look at how they're impacting people in the community. So we're students in our local context. We're students in an international context. We encourage our ministry staff and our leaders to constantly be developing, and we try to provide resources to help them to develop. So learning is foundational to our commitment. Now, learners become leaders. You know, because not everyone who professes to be a leader is a leader. The test of leadership is whether anyone's following. It's not whether you have a title, it's whether you're actually making an impact. And so Jesus models developing the disciples. He develops them over a 3-year period, and then he deploys them to be leaders, you know, the 12, but also the 120, you know, the 12 brothers and the 120 men and women were prepared and equipped to be leaders. And in a single day, they could receive 3,000 people. And so we believe it's important to develop disciples, raise them up, everyone to be leaders in their own right, with an eye towards legacy, that we think about what we're giving back and what we're leaving behind. And so that's why intergenerational conversations are really important to us. Interracial conversations are important to us. Conversations and engagement across economic divides are really important, because we want to think about what we're leaving behind. I think that's the thing. When I look at the ministry of Jesus, you know, the big test for any minister and any ministry is not what happens when you're there. It's whether it's greater when you're gone. And Jesus says in John 14:12, he says, you're going to do even greater things. So I personally believe that the investments we're making today are designed that whoever comes next in leading this congregation, they'll have a much greater impact because they'll be able to build them. So
that would be a good title for a podcast.
Amen. That could be like Greater Everyday Podcast. Yes, I know.
That's
Thank
right.
you for the plug. Thanks for the plug. That's the principle. That's the principle. So, but yeah, so that's us. Learning leaders' legacy.
Well, you mentioned Indonesia, Jakarta, the Indonesian church. Can you share a little bit about, just expand on that a little bit about what kind of an influence and impact that church has had on you personally and on your church as well? Like how you came in contact with them and how they came to influence you.
Yeah, it was really amazing what God did. So, in 2008, there was a Hope Youth Corps that was being sent to Indonesia, to Jakarta. And the folks that were leading it weren't able to make it. And so I got asked to be basically a replacement leader, along with an awesome sister, Casey. So she and I, we both led the Hope Youth Corps. And when I went there, it was a really important time in our church's history. In 2000, between 2000 and 2003, there are pretty transformative things that happened within our fellowship. And at that point, our fellowship was really trying to get a clear sense of ourselves and where we're going. And I was, at the same time, just for context, Tasha and I, about a year prior to that, were asked to do a radio show in Philly. So we're doing this radio show every Sunday night, and it was doing really well in terms of engagement, but it was really heartbreaking because we're just hearing these horrible, broken stories of what's going on in the Philly community. And we try to mobilize Christians to effect change. So we had like a in-person meeting where we invited people from the radio show to come, and 500 people showed up. And we had a hard time getting 8 disciples to show up. And so we're like, and again, I love the Philly church, no shade. I'm just saying it was just kind of where we were in terms of what to do. So we are noticing there's an outsized need in the world, and the disciples are still trying to make sense of where we're going. We go to Indonesia, and it's like a completely different world. It wasn't like we went back in time. It was like we went forward in time. So, we saw over 1,000 people studying the Bible, incredible engagement with the wealthiest of Indonesians and with the poorest of Indonesians at the same time in a relational context. And I left there and I was like, I got to learn what they're doing. Like whatever they're doing, we need to imitate it. So I went back home, took that fall, that was August of 2008, took that fall, talked to my wife, read some books on leadership, on fasting. And then we started out 2009, we fasted for 40 days, and God opened the door for us to go to the Bahamas to lead the church there. And from the Bahamas, we're able to really begin to build a relationship directly with the Southeast Asian churches, having them come in to train us in things like Good Enough Parenting and I Choose Us. And so when we were invited to interview with the church here in Potomac Valley in 2014, we met with the board. I said, look, we're happy to come, but here's one of the conditions. We have to make a commitment that every year for the next 10 years, we're going to invest in sending people over to Indonesia just to study. Like we need to go to school on what they're doing. And the church here was like, sounds great, because we already give them mission support. So it's logical for us to be able to maintain that relationship. It actually would be fantastic for our relationship because it wouldn't just be a one-way giving of mission support. We could have a real, relationship where there's real reciprocity. And over the past 5 years, going on 6 years, we've had 50 people in all different places in life. Some are leaders, some are not. But we've had 50 disciples from Potomac Valley go to Jakarta and go visit the churches that we support. And when we go there, we serve, we give, but mostly we go there with a notebook. We just go there to study. And one last thing I'll say about this is, this is something I learned from my father. You really need to be aware of culture and cultural trends. And one of the things I think we fail to recognize is the world today is not going to be the world tomorrow. And so when I look at the growth of, Islam, when I look at the growth in population and the population changes that are happening in the world, Indonesia looks a lot like what I believe America might look like 10 or 20 years from now, in terms of the very pluralistic view, and perhaps an outsized proportion of folks that do not identify as Christians. Now, in the U.S. context, I don't think it means that we have this massive Muslim population, but the rise and the growth of secularism in America is profound. And so we've got to think about how are we going to actually reach people in a different context, in a different world. And the only way I know to do that is to look at good working models of people that are able to do something in their context that defies reason. And what the GKDI church does, it defies reason. A Christian church is not supposed to do that well in that context. And so that's like, okay, we need to learn from that. It's a good case study to learn from. And they've been able to scale it, and they do it without an antagonism against the Muslim majority. They actually do it with a deep level of mutual respect, but a deep, solid Christian commitment. And I think that too was an unusual and is an unusual kind of testimony to their, really good church building. So we're learning from them. We're 5 years into our 10-year plan, and we're gonna keep going there. And we're learning from other people too.
Yeah, no, I thank you for that. I think that what you're sharing is just amazing. I do think that even right now for us here in the United States, with our current racial tension, I think there's a lot we can learn from how the churches in Indonesia are navigating just the challenges they face with the Muslim community.
Mm-hmm.
Again, as you said, not being antagonistic, but still, having an impact. So that's awesome. So one of the things that you mentioned a little bit earlier was that you're a church of small groups, not a church with small groups.
Yes.
And I like that phrase, but can you break that down a little bit more as far as what that means in your context?
Yeah, I think, a church with small groups is centers its energy around the Sunday experience,
Mm-hmm.
and measures things like attendance as like a prime indicator of success.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to look at lots of different things. But a church of small groups, as opposed to simply a church with small groups, puts the emphasis on the strength of the small group leader.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the strategic challenges that we have had as a fellowship is that we really do view the evangelist as the engine of our ministry. And so what happens is we want to get the fastest, strongest going evangelist, boom, 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 boom. And then we drive them until they wear out, and then we change them out. Let's get another one. And so the evangelist is kind of the locus of focus, where when I look at the New Testament model and I look at, great examples from great books like, and tried and true books like, Master Plan of Evangelism, or How People Grow, or Real Life Discipleship, what you see is that the investment should be primarily focused on the small group leader, because that's where life is lived by the disciple. And so you want to have great evangelists and great deacons and elders and great Sunday services and awesome worship. All of those things are important, but the essential component within the church is a small group of people. It's the 3, it's the 12. You got to focus there, and really your capacity to reach large groups of people is driven by that. And I think that's what Jesus was talking about in Matthew 9:38, is the harvest is plentiful. It's lots of people. It's the workers, people that can take care of a small group of people. Those are few. And so that's where we've tried to put our investment. And that's kind of our, if you were to ask us the most important component in the church, the small group is the most important component. But we understand that the other pieces of infrastructure are important for the functioning of the church. But we can't make it without small groups. We don't just want to have them. We need to be of them.
That's amazing. So one of the things I wanted to better understand, and again, like I said, this is kind of taking off of the podcast that you did with Mike Burns, just going a little bit deeper in some respects. So can you share a little bit about some of the training that you do for the small group leaders? And also, I think you mentioned an aspect of multiplication for the small groups. So can you share about those two aspects briefly?
Yeah. So again, this is a place where I'll tell you lots of humility here, bro. I mean, and we've tried so many different things. We've tried doing lots of family group leaders meetings. We've tried not having family group leaders meetings. We've tried lots of different things. Right now, we're actually in the middle of a training program from Real Life Discipleship. It's a Christian church out of Idaho.
Is that Putnam?
Yeah, that's Putnam. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're actually walking through his 12-week series as a church. It's interesting where we found that there are some people that are really predisposed to being great at taking care of people.
Mm.
And there are some people who are more predisposed to, being spreaders of the gospel and bringing people.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've been trying to do over the past 7 years is to dispel the myth that one of those are better than the other.
Mm.
It's a both and approach. Like you need
Right.
people to take care of people, but the people that take care of people also need to reach people. And you need people that are going to spread the gospel, but those people also need to either learn how to be taken care of or to learn how to take care of people, and so it's really challenged us to kind of get into the groups and figure it out. What's made it specifically challenging for us is there's nothing homogeneous about our group. So, so we've got singles and marrieds and, seniors and teenagers. We don't really have a big campus ministry. That's starting to kind of take off here a little bit, and so we've had to look at different things that work for different groups of people and provide some flexibility. Prior to the pandemic, we actually made a choice after studying this out for a long period of time to graduate midweeks and to decide we would do away with midweeks, but only do resource-based teaching times so that people would have more time in their schedule to focus on small groups. But since the pandemic, we've kind of had a resurgence of our midweeks because it was good for us to be able to check in with each other on a weekly basis. So I'll tell you that, our message is constant. Our methods are very fluid. So we're trying to figure out how do we adjust. But we're really trying to pursue an intentionality about training our small group leaders on how to do well at leading a small group.
Mm-hmm. So then you mentioned the other aspect was multiplication, and that sounds obvious, but can you touch on that briefly?
Yeah, so that's the thing that we found is really, it was wild as we're looking at the scriptures, right? So we are a missional community by definition, and so anyone that's a part of our family churches will tell you Matthew 28, that's like our thing, right?
Sure.
And but it's wild. Matthew 22 comes before Matthew 28, and Matthew 25 comes after Matthew 22. And so what we found is it's really important to marry these three principles. The people need to love God with everything. Mm-hmm. They need to serve other people in a relational context with no agenda, just serving people because it's right, doing right by the least of these. And that's the kind of disciples you want to multiply. What we found is that if you start and if you end with Matthew 28, what you end up doing is you end up producing a church of members. But if you start with Matthew 22, 25, 28, then you actually develop a cadre of disciples. And
Kingdom.
So of kingdom, yes. Kingdom oriented. It's about God. And it's not transactional. And, and people in our world, they have a really good sniff test for, so you just want me to join your group. And we're like, no, we don't just want you to join our group. Sure, love for you to join our group. We want you to know Jesus. We want you to love like Jesus. We want you to serve like Jesus. And that's something that we see in scripture. It's something we learned from the Indonesians in particular and the Singaporeans, is this idea of, relational discipleship as opposed to transactional discipleship. That's helping us with the multiplication process. I wouldn't say that right now I would define Potomac Valley as a multiplying church. We're aspiring to become a multiplying church. And but I think we're moving closer than we've ever been to this idea of people saying, "Oh, I'm a disciple. I make disciples who love Jesus and who serve the poor." You know, so that's where we are. Still a work in progress, though.
Mm-hmm. So I think you said you're about 20 miles from DC, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're basically in the thick of politics. And
We are, yeah.
I think it's probably always been that way, but I think since 2008, I would guess it's been a lot more obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And I would guess in the last 4 years, even more so. And so my
Mm-hmm.
question is, it seems like you don't shy away from addressing tough issues, which I think you had mentioned. This is something that can be kind of characteristic, sadly, of some of our churches, is that we don't really like to dive into the murky, deep waters and address issues. Can you share about your perspective and how you go about dealing with some of the challenges that we face as a society and church?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. Our fellowship of churches completely avoids political issues. We're influenced incredibly by them, but we avoid talking about them. And it goes back to our restoration roots. And it isn't born out of like something that I think is nefarious. I think it's really born out of a genuine concern that if you address difficult issues like these, it could strain and even lead to division.
Mm-hmm.
We experienced that here in Potomac Valley. So we struggled since 2008 to work through those issues. And so what we've kind of taken is an approach that the best defense is a strong offense. So Satan's going to bring this to us, right? So we can either shy away from it or we can lean into it, and lean into it by being ourselves, not by being partisans, but by extending our arms to those on the right as much as we do to those on the left, by engaging and humanizing politicians, by inviting them to church, inviting them to come serve with us in the community, building
Democrats, Republicans, independents.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And we've actually done that. So we've had a Democratic congressman, a Republican congressman come and speak to our church. We've had the equivalent of a mayor.
Not their agendas necessarily, but to share like in whether serving activity or whatever specific non-partisan, in other words. Okay.
Yes, exactly. No, you're exactly right. And I'll tell you, it made us nervous when we did it first, but we stayed with it. So we would invite them and we say, all right, we're going to have, it's 9/11. Can you come and talk to us about being a good neighbor?
Okay.
It's 4th of July. Can you come to the barbecue and talk to us about loving our community? So we would identify nonpartisan issues that where we can find common ground. Hey, we're going to go serve in the community. Can you come and be with us? When the pandemic was at the very beginning of the lockdown, we invited all of the local officials that were able to come to talk to us and give us an update on COVID. During the pandemic, we've been a part of moderating discussions on social justice issues.
Yes, I think you shared that you actually were asked by the Prince William, I believe it is, area to actually moderate because they believe you are impartial, that you wouldn't, choose a Democrat or Republican side, but you would be impartial in just how you administered things, which I think is a great testament to not avoiding politics. You got into it, but you got into it in a way, and I think you use the term cruciform,
Yes.
where you basically were, extending yourself to both parties, understanding that they could crucify you, so to speak, at any point, but you were giving yourself up to them to bring them together, was, I think, and to Christ, essentially.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I'll be honest with you, it's scary. So, it's not, I don't want to give anyone the sense that we don't have, our concerns about doing it. Because what happens is if you're friends with one group of people, the other group of people think badly about you. And if you're friends with, and so we're friends with both groups of people. And, as a Black man in America, as a minister, the default view is that I would be a Democrat. And as a Black man that has friends that are Republicans, the default view is then you're a Black Republican. And I have my own personal views, but I have committed myself more than anything else that I'm legitimately going to be impartial in terms of how we engage in the community, because I really do want my friends who are Republicans and my friends who are Democrats to be disciples. Like I love them. They are genuinely my friends. And you know, one of the things that really encouraged me, man, was there was a tiff that happened between a Republican and a Democrat in our local news. And I had someone call me up and say, "Hey, so isn't this person a part of your church?" And I was like, "I'd be happy to meet with them." You know, so I met with both parties, and we're able to pray and open the Bible. And I think there was tears, and there was forgiveness, and there was reconciliation. And they privately mended the tiff. They had already talked, but it cemented that the tiff was over, and there hasn't been anything else that's happened. Now, given the dynamism of politics, I imagine there will be more. But you know, our approach, it's not to be partisan, but rather to be cruciformed, and to, you know, and to really recognize, like, this is where we live. Now, I'm not saying that's what everyone should do. You know, whatever doesn't come from faith is sin. So I'm not saying everyone should now invite the elected officials, but I have a history of engagement with political leaders. My dad, when I was growing up in Jamaica, ran for political office. So I'm not uncomfortable with politicians. You know, they're just people, you know, and so I want to help everybody here to make it. And it's been great engaging with them. And but it, you know, please pray for us, because, you know, one false step and you can step on a landmine, you know. And so, you know, and I mean, but you know, but we live in a war zone, so, you know, I'm kind of stuck, you know. It's like we can either go indoors or we can march forward, and so we've chose to march forward.
Yeah, but also going indoors is really not being the kingdom. There's no light, you know, that's hiding under a bush. So you know, we do need to find a way to engage, but do it in a way that's, you know, as you said, cruciform, sacrificial, all the things that Jesus would want us to do. As we come to a close here, so I'm just going to read this. This is a little bit more I wanted to cover. So obviously you've noted some different methods of for impact, which include engaging with local leaders, gaining access through grants, funds, multiplication of small groups, which we discussed, and social media as a weapon. So can you discuss those three, which is engaging with local leaders, gaining access to grant funds, and social media as a weapon, just briefly?
Yeah, I think it's important to be embedded in your local community, engaged in your local community, but not entangled in the world.
Okay.
So, but the key is that you have to have a strong sense of core values. And so I think it's critical for churches, as it's been for us, to be true to our core values and who we are. There's no compromise as it relates to what is sound doctrine. But there has to be a fluidity of methods in terms of how we engage. So we engage with local leaders, elected officials, and unelected local officials, to see how we can be a resource to the community. So that's you know, for us, that's the town of Dumfries, that's, you know, the city of Fredericksburg, that's Stafford County, Prince William County, you know, engaging with people in our local community and building long-term relationships. You know, Stephen Covey talked about the fact that, you know, the key place you want to be is to spend your time in quadrant 2 relationships. So things that are not urgent but are important. And I think understanding and learning who the influencers are, understanding where the fault lines are in your community, studying your community, learning the demographics of the community that you're in, setting a locus of focus. So for us, that locus of focus is 30 square miles from our one campus and 30 square miles to the other campus. So we kind of have two campuses, one in Fredericksburg, one in Dumfries, and we have a locus of focus around those areas. So I think getting to know those people. What I've found is if you engage, you'd be surprised. People are waiting for people that care, that don't want anything. So I think that's really important. So engagement's really important. There are grant funds that are out there, and you want to be judicious about which grants you apply for and who you partner with. But there's a lot of need, and there are not enough people to meet those needs. I think it's important for us as the kingdom of God in the 21st century to remember how the church in the first century dealt with things. We were the ones that served. We're the ones that engaged with the slaves of Rome. We're the ones that bound up the wounds. And where you can be an agent of change, engage with people that make sense for you to engage with. For us, we engage with the Alliance, which is a human service organization here in Prince William. I currently serve till June as the chair, and we're able to. The Alliance got $3 million of funds. Potomac Valley applied, and I wasn't a part of the process, but we were awarded $450,000 to serve the community, specifically $476,666, and we took about $22,000 and 54 cents. Every dime matters, and we gave it out, to meet needs.
That's awesome.
And so that we're able to do that. Just this week, we're able to partner with the governor's office and with the county staff to be able to be a part of a vaccination engagement effort. And our congregation was able to get 1,500 people signed up to get vaccines. And some of them are getting vaccines right now as we're recording right now. And so, don't underestimate the power of engagement and, the power of working with local community leaders. I think that's really critical.
So I think the last one on that was social media as a weapon. Can you share about that briefly?
Yeah. So, again, what Satan uses for evil, we've got to use for good. The first century church utilized the Roman road to spread the gospel, and the internet is
and Koine Greek.
Yes, and Koine Greek.
What was their Twitter?
It was. You're exactly right. So simple language that everybody speaks and a road that everyone accesses, and they used it. We live in the 21st century. The internet is the road. It is the American road. Thank you, U.S. military, for building it. Thank you, media companies, for spreading it. But we've got to bring light there. And so we try to use that the best we can. We've gotten really great help from our media team. We've gotten great help from St. Rock Media, which is run by a disciple, Kayla Haley, out of Denver. They've given us great coaching and advice. We've learned from the Indonesians. They've done a really great job with their Instagram presence, so we learned from them. And Marcus and Lexi Thomas, who lead our youth and family ministry, also oversee our media ministry and our worship ministry. And they're doing a great job leading our efforts here. Been really blown away. I mean, we've seen just a seismic level of impact since COVID in terms of our engagement. And we don't always get it right, and where we get it wrong, we own it and we fix it, and we're learning. But we definitely see this medium as you said, Koine Greek and the Roman road. You use what's in front of you, and what's in front of us is this amazing tool. I personally believe that it will perhaps be the game changer in the spread of the gospel all over the world. And I think we're actually at a place in humanity where it is plausible, if we are focused, to actually evangelize the world. Not quite maybe the way we may have imagined, with no sense of control, but with a sense of just conviction. I think we can spread the message. And so I'm really excited about the next decade and beyond, if God grants us that time, because I think we're on to the most dynamic change in Christianity right now.
Mm-hmm. So just one real last few things as we wrap up. I know you're pursuing a doctorate right now.
Mm-hmm.
What are you pursuing, and what's the reason? Just briefly.
Yeah, so all rivers kind of flow into the ocean, right? So everything kind of flows to a central point. In this idea of being a learner and a leader and leaving behind a legacy, I wanted to pursue doctoral studies through Virginia Theological Seminary, specifically because they focus on action research. So they and so what I'm doing is it's a degree in educational leadership that focuses on action research. So I'm functionally going to spend my doctoral study studying what I've been talking about in this conversation, studying what we're doing with the Potomac Valley Church, and looking at how that would be a scalable effort that we can share with, other churches or with a future generation.
So when you say action, you're meaning specifically, as the word implies, it's not just, the research isn't just, reviewing stuff and so forth, but it's how action can be made in different fields. Is that specifically in church, in this one specifically?
Yes, it's very practical theology oriented, if you will.
That's awesome.
So you study and you kind of look at a context of your ministry context, and you study your ministry context, and you spend 5 years gaining the skills to look at, great case studies, have your work evaluated, but it has to be rooted in what the local church is doing. And so Potomac Valley is the subject of my doctoral studies. So so it makes it really simple, because I'm always studying. So
you're a smart guy, Will, man.
It's simple. All rivers into the ocean. So so that's the goal.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I got so many questions. So just do 2 last ones and wrap up. Banquet was number 1. So I know you had a banquet. I think it came about through special missions. You wanted to really thank the individuals who had, helped make it happen, and then kind of morphed, if you will, into something bigger than that, where you kind of, have 1,000 pounds of meat, and you're encouraging the community. So, can you share briefly about that?
Oh, I love talking about the Great Banquet. It's so amazing. So, one of my mentors is Antonio Boyd, and Antonio Boyd for many years worked as a VP with Hope Worldwide, and about maybe, I think 5 years ago, we had an amazing missions contribution. And I was calling Antonio. I was like, man, the church did great. It was awesome. And Antonio, in his fashion, said to me, Will, you need to thank those people. They're the ones that sacrificed that money. You need to feed those people, and you need to say thank you. And I said, yeah, Antonio, done. I'm gonna do it. So we got the staff, we bought aprons, we got, I don't know, maybe 100, 200 pounds of food. And we, for midweek, we had the staff barbecue and feed the church and say thank you. And it was awesome. And we were so excited about it. And then after that happened, we were planning for the next Easter with our staff. And so, we're talking about what are some crazy things we can do for Easter, came up with all sorts of crazy ideas.
Is that most of the your meeting is what is a crazy thing we can do?
Yes, that's pretty consistent. Our meet with the staff. So the staff is the crazy group.
That's awesome.
The core group are like, how can we help the crazy group? Which includes all of us. So but there's always something crazy going on. So but yeah, so we talked, and 2 of the staff members were like, look, Logan and Ashley, they were like, when we read the scriptures, Jesus threw a banquet. He threw a banquet. We should throw a banquet for the poor, and so awesome. We did that, and that's how it got started. What it's become now is an annual barbecue where we at Easter, we barbecue 1,000 pounds of meat. We give away free groceries to anybody in the community that needs groceries, free clothing, but we really insist on the fact that it needs to be a community meal. So we invite the homeless to come, but we sit and eat together. We have our kids and our neighbors, and we sit and eat together. And so folks are welcome to come. We usually have Easter service before, and then the great banquet after. And folks can come to church, or they can just come to the barbecue. The truth is, we're testifying to the gospel with words and testifying to the gospel without words. But all day long, all Easter Sunday long, we're proclaiming the gospel. So it's our favorite thing. Last year, because of COVID, we couldn't do it. We can't wait till Easter of 22, because we're coming out with a passion for the great banquet. So looking forward to it. Yeah.
So last one is just a piece of advice. So if you had, and I know you're training a young evangelist right now, but let's say young evangelists are watching this, or even, older or what have you, and they're thinking, man, what's happening in your church is just amazing. What would be some advice you could give them if they we want to use the rest of this year to kind of come up with some plans that we can either have our own 10-year plan or whatever they decide? What would be some advice that you would give them?
Yeah, Zechariah 4:10. Don't despise the day of small beginnings. Like start small. Start small. We're sharing about stuff that's happened over a 7-year period. That's been the product of 20 plus years of ministry evaluation and testing and lots of failure, lots of failure, lots and lots of failure. Like we've tried so many things that were like that didn't work before the great banquet did. So I would just, don't underestimate small beginnings. Also, don't underestimate the power of hard work. Longfellow said an amazing poem that I recite almost daily. The heights of great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were upward toiling through the night. It is the steady grind when no one's looking, when no one's watching. It's that's what matters. And so, and honestly, some of the most amazing ministry that's done, many of us never hear about, but God knows, heaven knows, and hell definitely knows that it's happening. And so don't underestimate just the daily quiet grind of praying, God, help my heart to be more like yours. Help my mind to be more like yours. Bring people into my life that can help me to grow. Open doors in our local community. But the steady grind when no one's watching, that's the key. So start small and work hard.
I think with that, obviously from this video, the different things that you mentioned, as far as having those core principles and that flexibility, I think the learning, the leadership, and the legacy are just awesome. Wanted to just close out with Dr. Rodriguez to just share a few words, just thanking you and just your church just for your example, and we'll wrap it up. Dr. Richard?
Yeah, Will, I just, I when Otoma asked me to sit in on this interview, I said, well, unfortunately, I don't know enough about this brother, and he gave me an interview that you had with Michael Burns, and I was just so blown away by that interview, and even more impressed now, just talking to you face to face, and just to see, your humility and your love for God and your love for His people and the community. And I just think that, I look forward to what God is going to do in your life and in your ministry over the next few years. I mean, you've won a fan, and I really admire what you're doing, my brother. And I just want to encourage you. And I will be praying for you and the Potomac Valley Church moving forward.
Amen. Thank you.
What I love also is that you've decentralized the entire church. So, you're more the person that helps people to see the main things are leadership, learning, leadership, and legacy as you go after it yourself, but you're trying to raise, a church of small groups, as you said, which I think is, the way to go about it. So again, thanks so much for what you're doing. Definitely look forward to learning more. I love your meetings. What's the crazy thing we can do to really keep moving the needle? And that's definitely what we need. So thanks again for your time. Those of you, again, please consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you.